on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Somebody's been digging up the bodies of dead girls.
People are missing.
She wasn't killed by vampires.
Okay, so we got a body snatcher. What does that mean?
There's a new scare in Sunnydale.
What I saw didn't add up to 3 whole girls.
And no one is prepared.
Hello?
For this kind of evil.
Where did he take her?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh my god.
When it's cold outside,
Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 2, Episode 2, Some Assembly Required, written by Ty King and directed by Bruce Seth Green, is a soft adaptation of Mary Shelley's classic 1818 horror novel, Frankenstein, and can be considered specifically a soft remake of the 1935 Universal film, Bride of Frankenstein, and depicting a specific part of the Frankenstein story. Joss Whedon will revisit this adaptation concept again in Buffy Season 4 and in Avengers Age of Ultron. In Frankenstein, both Victor Frankenstein and the Creature are sympathetic antagonists. Victor just cares about the glory of proving that his idea works, and he acts as an abusive father to his creation, trying to kill him because he's horrific in appearance. The Creature finds a blind man who, in his ignorance, thinks that the Creature is human and takes the role of surrogate father to raise him. The blind man's son arrives and, in his horror, chases the Creature away. The Creature is filled with anger and decides to take out his vengeance on Victor, his abusive father, becoming as abusive as him because prejudice made his life defined by hate. He corners Victor and coerces him into making a second creature, a mate. Victor finds the idea of animating another horrific golem so repugnant that he stops at the last minute. Angry, the Creature kills everyone he loves and chases him to the ends of the earth. It's a story about prejudice, hatred, and ego being bad, while doing a bit of bigoted dabbling in them to get across the point of the Creature being horrific. And it's sometimes considered an early feminist work. There are all sorts of theories about the novel critically portraying men's control fantasies, and Victor taking on a feminine role in the pursuit of the creation of life. As Joss's big radical feminist belief is that men are collectively envious of women's ability to become pregnant, this might be part of his attraction to the narrative. Some Assembly Required deals with similar elements and exaggerates the feminist angle with some truly toxic masculinity. Some Assembly Required is also the second purely science fiction episode, following Season 1, Episode 11, Out of Mind, Out of Sight. The second story of the season, Some Assembly Required, is a counterpart to Season 1, Episode 3, Witch, which followed the single-story 2-part season opener, Welcome to the Hellmouth and The Harvest, and it shares similar components, including a sports theme, a dysfunctional family with an abusive mother, and making Cordelia a damsel in distress for Buffy to rescue. While Witch focuses on feminine competition in the sport of cheerleading, Some Assembly Required focuses on masculine loyalty in the sport of football and the bonds of toxic masculinity, permitting horrible acts of lustful aggression against women. In the right hands, this could be a fascinating exploration of gender themes that would contribute to an overarching feminist narrative. Unfortunately, this is a bad episode. There is just no getting around that. Everything about this episode is clunky. The dialogue, the characterizations, and the politics. It has elements to suggest the potential for meaningful feminist storytelling, but the execution is terrible, and it ends up sexist, making Angel into a jerk, and regressing Xander's character development. It's just a mess. I place most of the blame on writer Ty King, who previously worked on sitcoms like Growing Pains, Empty Nest, and Parenthood, also a show that Joss Whedon worked on, and that's probably where he met him. Joss has demonstrated the range to work on both half-hour sitcoms and hour-long dramas, but I'm thinking that Ty King didn't have the range. The flaws in characterization make sense if Ty King was working with a sitcom model, where character consistency is of value, and humor is derived from conflict with exaggerated archetypes conflicting with each other, which is fine in a sitcom, but repellent in a character drama. The episode has a lot of good lines in the form of rapid-fire quips, like a sitcom, but I don't think that Bruce Seth Green knew what to do with it. The actor's delivery is just bad, and I don't think it's their fault. This was essentially Tai King's only episode in the series. He received credit for writing Season 2, Episode 17, Passion, but I find it highly likely that Joss Whedon extensively rewrote it and essentially made it his own, as he presumably did with Season 2, Episode 6, Halloween, after being dissatisfied with that writer's take on the dialogue. Prior to doing research for this review, I could have sworn that Joss Whedon wrote Passion. It just feels like his work, and it's a great episode. Unfortunately, Joss wasn't quick enough to stop Tai King from making a mess of Some Assembly Required. Let's see how bad the damage is. The episode starts with Buffy waiting around in the graveyard for a vampire to wake up. Then who should show up but Angel? After the Bitka move she did in Season 2, Episode 1 when she was bad, they definitely need to talk. Buffy needs to apologize and indicate that she is still interested in dating Angel and has no interest in Xander. That's fine. Unfortunately, the characterizations of both of them are greatly lacking. It's especially apparent directly after watching When She Was Bad. It's like the divide between the animation quality of a Disney movie and its sequel. If the episodes continued to be written by Joss Whedon, I think we could have had a satisfying continuation of that conflict, but instead it escalates in stilted ways. Angel is jealous of Xander, and he snipes at him by bringing up the age gap. He considers himself more mature than Xander, and therefore more deserving of respect. So he isn't even worried about the possibility of Xander appealing more to her. Clearly. Buffy rightly points out that because she's the same age as Xander, that he can't respect her if he doesn't respect Xander, which wasn't what he meant. He does respect Xander as a rival for Buffy's affections, though, so he logically respects Buffy. Buffy is left with a lingering doubt that will become significant later on, particularly in Halloween, Season 2, Episode 7, Lie to Me, and Season 2, Episode 13, Surprise. A lot of feminists find the Buffy and Angel age gap gross, so let me address that. Angel is over 200 years older than Buffy, but he's characterized specifically as equivalent to a college guy, and their relationship is framed as a high school girl being involved with a college student. Joy seems to guess that they're a secret couple when she meets Angel in Season 1, Episode 7, Angel, and she clearly doesn't approve, but the show frames it as an old, overbearing parent being too restrictive, and just not getting what we get when we see the world through Buffy's eyes. It's framed as unusual, but sexy and fun, as Buffy gets to achieve a relationship that other girls only fantasize about. Passion revisits Joyce's opinion of Angel, and while there is still a characterization of Mom doesn't understand, there is a recognition of the fact that she might be onto something too. It's a missed opportunity not to have a nod to that early in the season. These days, it's popular for feminists to characterize college-high school relationships as always abusive. Age gaps across the legal definition of adulthood are considered one step away from pedophilia and child rape. I think that this black and white thinking is reductive and will burn a lot of people who don't deserve it. I think there's reason to be concerned, and that things like Joyce's reaction to Buffy and Angel's relationship should be placed in higher focus and evaluated more even-handedly than just dismissing old, out-of-touch mom, that their age gap's functional problems should be discussed more in the foreground, and that it should generally be treated as a controversial subject that can inspire drama. But I don't agree that merely having it in the show endorses abuse. I think that people are going to have high school-college relationships, regardless of our academic discussion of it, and that these people deserve respectful representation. So I'm only going to criticize the handling of the Buffy-Angel relationship. It is worth note that Buffy and Angel's relationship is only a metaphor for a college-high school relationship. The characters are extraordinary supernatural beings on a basically even footing in an anarchic setting. Buffy has superpowers and a socially recognized right to kill Angel. Angel might be older than her, but he's whiny enough to be considered about as emotionally mature as Xander. The show's framing gives Buffy adequate power enough to make all of their interactions unquestionably consensual. I would point to the sexism of presuming male power and female weakness for why feminists constantly frame the relationship as a question of Buffy's ability to consent and not Angel's, despite him quite possibly having less power in the dynamic. Also, skipping ahead a bit, I have never heard anyone criticize Anya being 1,000 years older than Xander, or question his ability to consent, despite Anya being way older than him. Double standard much? I think how old you are when you watch the show also has an impact on how you interpret it. Most girls identify with Buffy and appreciate her relationship with Angel as a sexual fantasy, which is how the relationship was intended. There is a lot of focus on David Boreanaz being cast because he's so dreamy. He's the sex object. When adult women watch the show, they're not as apt to identify with Buffy and will other her as a child, distinguishing her from them as adults. They see Angel and want to protect Buffy, the child, from this strange older man. And they might suspect Joss Whedon of being a predator who writes Angel as a self-insert to fulfill a fantasy of dating a sexy high school girl, as if it's a porn trope. This is just a mistake. You're supposed to identify with Buffy. Buffy and Xander are Joss's self-insert characters, not Angel. Angel is David Greenwald's creation, and it took until after Angel the series started for Joss to become comfortable writing him.
Buffy went through a lot, but I always had a very firm base with her. She's the guy you don't see coming. She was my avatar. She was, the girl in the picture, whereas Angel was a straight-up hero, and that made him much harder to write. So figuring out why he was doing what he was doing became the central question.
Adult women watching the show now should embrace their inner teenager and ogle Angel through Buffy's perspective, as the show was meant to be watched. Or just realize that the show isn't for them. Sit back and ship Angel and Giles. You know they're meant for each other. Buffy stumbles into an open grave and discovers that grave robbers stole the body of a young woman. The next day at school, Willow does research and finds out that she and 2 other high school girls were in a terrible car crash that killed them instantly. Thinking correctly that the grave robbers would go for their corpses too, they decide to dig up the graves to see if the bodies are intact. In order to have Buffy and Willow talk and deliver exposition, they sit on the sidelines while Xander and Giles do the digging. This leads to a gross joke enforcing gender roles.
Sorry, but I'm an old-fashioned gal. I was raised to believe that men dig up the corpses and that women have the babies.
It's a joke, but it doesn't challenge gender roles. It just lets them be for the sake of a joke. It doesn't live up to the dominant theme of the show, feminist subversion of sexist cliches, and doesn't even make sense in context because Buffy is the enforcer of the group and would be the logical choice for hard labor. One of the most defining parts of her character is that she's not delicate like you would expect a girl to be.
Buffy has super strength. Why don't we just load her up like one of those little horses?
Some Assembly Required moves forward on the idea that Cordelia is interested in Angel by having her actively pursue him, while Buffy assumes the worst of Angel and doesn't communicate with him, a flaw we'll see annoyingly often in the coming episodes. Cordelia stumbles into some dead body parts, Angel helps her out, and they report their find to Buffy. Cue drama. Very similar to Season 1, Episode 8, I, Robot You, Jane, we're introduced to 2 other students who turn out to be villains. Chris, a nice science nerd, and Eric, a lively pervert who goes around taking images of women, ostensibly for the yearbook. Eric illustrates the concept of the male gaze, objectifying women through the lens of his camera, reducing them to discrete body parts of sexual appeal. There could be a feminist point to it, and when I was younger I inferred one, but Tai King never connects the dots, and it ends up just having sexism float in the middle of the episode.
Oh, look at those legs.
No, thank you.
Well, isn't that an ironic line? Similar to the various homophobic jokes, this bit emphasizes the heteronormativity where Eric and Willow exist in opposing roles as straight people of opposing genders. On the other hand, maybe legs aren't her thing.
I'm a breast girl myself.
As it turns out, Chris and Eric are minions of Chris's undead older brother Daryl.
This my brother Daryl, that's my other brother Daryl.
And are collecting body parts to turn into a perfect woman to be his bride of Frankenstein, as appears to be an attempt at a feminist story about dehumanizing women. Chris has a strict rule of only collecting dead body parts, but Eric wants to kill women to take their parts, and Daryl is willing to make an exception for Cordelia to serve as the head. The villain's whole deal is weird. Daryl used to be the star football player at the school and was his mother's favorite son. Cordelia was in love with him, but he didn't return her affection. He tragically died in a rock climbing accident, and then Chris galvanized him back to life.
It's alive!
Chris takes the role of Victor in Daryl's reanimation, but that's where the resemblance ends. He's just a needy younger brother starved for affection, trying to do what's best for Daryl. He's similar to Dave from I, Robot You, Jane, seeking Moloch's affection, but getting cold feet when violence gets involved. But Dave has more innocence than Chris for being more ignorant and love-bombed into serving a monster. Chris knowingly lets things go on longer than he should and is presented as equally sympathetic, but I think he's a bit of a douchebag. Daryl, as a resurrected corpse, takes the role of the creature, but is more of an undead douchebag. There is nothing about anyone being abusive to him or really treating him with hatred. He imagines he would face widespread hatred if he made himself known, but that's just his fear. Realistically, he'd get sympathy and adoration because he came back from the dead. He'd probably be a guest on talk shows and compete on Dancing with the Stars. He's only staying hidden because he's shy. That means when he shows that he's evil, he's just a guy who happens to be evil. There's no meaning to it, despite what the show tries to make you think with the whole sympathetic backstory. There's no indication he came back wrong like a vampire either. The resurrection is completely glossed over. As for Eric, I guess he serves the role of the hunchbacked assistant from the movies, but he doesn't make any sense. Fritz, his I, Robot You, Jane counterpart, at least had Moloch love-bombing him to explain his actions. Eric is just a randomly evil misogynist. He's not even a good depiction of a misogynist like Tucker in Season 3, Episode 20, The Prom. He's just a random bad guy because the plot demanded one. With a character that one shot, I'd jazz him up a bit by going for full cheese and giving him a hunchback in homage.
What hamp?
The Scoobies do some snooping and figure out that Chris and Eric are putting together a corpse bride, and probably will kill someone because it'd be necessary for the head to be fresh to keep the brain cells from dying before they can animate her. You might notice that I skipped over the part where the Scoobies figured out that Chris knows a scientific process to bring people back from the dead. And so does the show. They literally make the leap from stitching together body parts to reanimating dead tissue. At least in I, Robot You, Jane, Buffy could conceivably figure out what's going on from the evidence, even if it is unlikely. In Some Assembly Required, they make a huge assumption without all of the puzzle pieces. Buffy goes to confront Chris and finds his neglectful mother, who's obsessed with Daryl's football videos.
Cool motive, still murder.
She learns Cordelia is the target and goes to save her. Buffy is successful at fighting off Chris and Eric, but Daryl gets Cordelia alone, abducts her, and takes her to the school's abandoned science lab. They have one of those. Chris switches sides and helps Buffy. Buffy saves Cordelia, burns down another school building, and Daryl commits suicide by running into the flame. It's superficially similar to the creature in the burning windmill at the end of the movie Frankenstein. The episode tries to play up the drama of Chris and Daryl, but honestly, who cares? These characters are nowhere near as sympathetic as the show seems to think. There's a subplot about Giles and Jenny going on a date. It interestingly subverts gender roles by having Giles be the passive one and Jenny be the assertive one, and have an interest in sports. Jenny takes Giles to the high school football game, and it goes terribly, but she makes the assertion that they will have another date, and that the next date will be better. The wrap-up is the one good scene in the whole episode, and I suspect that Joss Whedon wrote it. He is a script doctor, and Buffy writers have said that when they get praised for great lines, they often have to admit that Joss wrote them. What this says to me is that Joss really cared about hitting 3 points. 1. The Jenny and Giles romance is undeterred. 2. Cordelia might be a love interest for Xander, but he's an idiot and can't see the opportunity. 3. Angel is jealous of Xander, thinking that he as a human can offer Buffy something that Angel can't. Buffy assures him that he has nothing to worry about. What this indicates is that any further Xander-Buffy tension is specifically there for the sake of drama. Xander-Cordelia and Buffy-Angel romances are where the season is headed. It may be annoying when Xander and Angel clash over their interest in Buffy, but it's a contrived conflict, and not where Joss thinks it's important for the season to go. Presumably propelled by Joss's writing, the episode ends on a far stronger note than the rest of it. I'm left thinking, where the hell is that DeSoto?
Grr, arg.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day with
My girl. Please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, And send me an email if you want to commission a video review, and click the link below to support me on Patreon. Pledges of $5 or more will earn you a special thank you at the end of each video. Thank you, and please check out my related videos.